You're listening to the Social Selling Simplified podcast. Stick around if you too are obsessed with learning things that actually work and believe that success leaves clues. We're all about identifying results-producing roadmaps and getting super clear on how to scale and grow your online business. From part-timer to president, social selling expert Ashley Shaw will help you connect the dots and take the guesswork out of what works to grow a social selling empire. It's time to hear from social selling legends, listen in on truthful conversations, and learn the best tips and tricks to reduce the marketing overwhelm so you can build the social selling business of your dreams. If you're ready to go all in, no holding back, and build the business you've always wanted, you're in the right place. Here's your host, educator, social selling guru, and fitness industry OG, Ashley Shaw.
Welcome to Social Selling Simplified. I'm your host, Ashley Shaw, and today I'm talking to Cassandra Wilder. She's a naturopathic doctor and the leading expert in women's cyclical health and menstruation. She's also known for her passion and wisdom in women's health and reproductive health, and she's a speaker and leader bridging the gap between science and spirituality. That could not resonate with me more in terms of that gap. And I love that we're going to have a conversation about that today. She's also the CEO of Goddess Ceremony and the host of Goddess Ceremony podcast and the author of a woman's book that is coming out, titled To Be Determined, and going to be published in 2020. So thank you so much for being here today, Cassandra. I'm so excited to dive in with you and talk more about productivity and how all the cycles come together and can make us at our best to do certain things. And then also when the best times are to not take on certain tasks and things. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about how you got into naturopathic medicine and then what actually led you to become an expert in cyclical health and menstruation.
Such a good question. I think especially when someone's in the natural health field, it's usually because they had their own healing experience or their own kind of run around with normal medicine to where they felt like they didn't get the support they needed. So they had to dig a little deeper and do some of it on their own. And for me, it was dealing with really debilitating cycles when I was younger and really only being given the option of something like birth control. And even at that young age, I remember thinking like, but does that actually fix this? Does this actually address what's truly holding me back here? And all of these severe symptoms that would come up every month with my period. So I knew I wanted to go into healthcare of some kind always. I did my undergrad at the University of Utah. And then when I started naturopathic school, I remember this feeling of coming home where I was like, these are my people that see the body as a whole complete things, people that are wanting to understand the root cause of any imbalance we see in the body. And so when I graduated, I initially didn't specialize so much in women's cyclical health. I had this idea, this feeling that I wanted to serve everyone. And I think that's a common thing that we see as entrepreneurs, where we feel like we have so many tools and gifts that we really don't want to niche. Like if you would have told me to niche at that point, I would have been like, no way, that's limiting. Mm-hmm. That will hold me back from serving more people. But I found that naturally, that was the kind of woman I attracted into my consult room, were these women with very irregular cycles, debilitating periods, struggling to get pregnant, cysts and fibroids. And so quickly I began to realize that there was such a need for this, that, nearly half the population is experiencing this thing every single month. And yet there's no space to talk about it. It's so taboo. We don't even talk about it, really amongst ourselves. And so the more I started to work with women's cyclical health, the more I felt enlivened by it. And so the more I specialized in the hormone component, I saw my own relationship with my body transform. And then I saw my business start to shift as well. As I started to get out of this hyper go, hustle, very masculine maybe way of doing business, and instead began to listen to these cycles throughout the month, I really felt like I connected to something that was so beyond anything I'd ever learned in any business course, in any health book. And it's been an amazing journey.
Oh, I love how you said that, like, bringing out the feminine, the listening to the signs, the leaning into what feels good, instead of it feeling like a lot of the times in business, it can feel like, oh, there's only one way to do this. I need to be really, like you said, like hustle. I need to reach everyone. Like, I don't want to be limiting and cut people off. And yet, the opposite is really, I think, true as well. I've seen that time and time again. The more that I lean into my sweet spot, what feels right, what resonates. Like you just open up this like oyster of possibility that feels so good. So cool that that happened on your journey for you.
Yes, I'm glad you know exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny because I did a women's studies degree and an English literature degree. And there was a very stark difference between the, the structure of the classes and just how I felt. Like when you said you felt like you were like coming home, that's how I felt when I was in women's studies. It was like all of a sudden, all these things that no one talked about, the way that women are made to feel about their bodies and the way that, we're raised to feel like we need to change them. Like all of a sudden uncovering this stuff for the first time and being just blown away by how have I never had this dialogue with anyone before? And it just feeling so refreshing and beautiful. And like, it was like unraveling a whole new part of life I had never known. So
yes. Yeah, that's the word for it. Truly unraveling like all of these beliefs and things that we've been told is just the way it is.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So in terms of if we dive into this idea around productivity, can you sort of set the frame for us of maybe how most entrepreneurs operate and then what really the underlying cycles and what those things actually maybe we should be set up for in a bit of a different way?
Such a good question. So it's important to look at the idea of business in general is based on male productivity patterns. And so, for example, for context here, in one day, in a 24-hour period, a man will move through an entire cycle of productivity, of times of rest, better times to be in the workplace, better times to be more connected to self, more so at home. And a woman goes through that same cycle, but it takes us 29 and a half days to go through that. So you can imagine each phase of that is a lot more exaggerated. And so this is why for a lot of us, we come into the entrepreneur space or even the workforce in general, and we have this idea of we got to go, we got to hustle. We're trying to keep up with, I think rat race is a fair word here. And then a lot of us do find that maybe it takes 6 months, maybe it takes a couple years, but eventually we hit that point that I think can only be described as burnouts, where we kind of second guess this whole thing. We feel like, we're no longer feeling it. We're no longer feeling really enlivened by it. And we think that it's something wrong with us, but instead it's us trying to fit into a cycle that has absolutely no resonance with people with feminine bodies. So to kind of demystify all of this here, women move through 4 distinct phases throughout the month. And so not only for a health perspective is this essential, but also for that business, because especially as an entrepreneur, we have that freedom to plug in things to different phases of the month. So we can really start to work with our bodies rather than against it. And sadly, most of us learn just how to plug into this system that we think is meant to bring us all this money and joy and, whatever. So when we look at those 4 distinct patterns, we have our menstrual time, we have our follicular time, we have our ovulation time, and we have our luteal phase. So, for example, if we start at the beginning, your follicular phase is that phase right after your period, but before ovulation. So this is usually a week to 2 weeks in that phase. And in this time, this is kind of like the energy of spring in our business. So this is the best time to set goals and intentions in our business, a really good time to start to get clarity about what it is we want to create over the coming month in our business. A really nice time to start to delegate, to start to build that momentum, to get ready for a launch, to start to schedule more extroverted social activities like podcast interviews, like summits, anything like that. By the time we reach our ovulation phase, and as women, we generally know when we're ovulating because our mood is elevated, we tend to be extra social, we may have a lot of cervical mucus, libido is higher. I mean, everything in your body is saying create and do. This is when you can do the quote hustle lifestyle, when you can work a 12 or 14-hour day and it's totally going to feel good. This is when you are at the top of your game. So this is where if you can do your launch, if you can plug in your sales calls or your clients, this is that time when everything really is absolutely in your favor for your success. Now, an interesting thing though happens right after your ovulation phase. If you look at a chart of your hormones as women, you see a really distinct nosedive right around your ovulation time. So this is where we move into our luteal phase. And some women feel this drop more significantly than others. Some people feel like one day they feel amazing, they're super embodied, and the next day they're like, I just no, not feeling it. I'll be on the couch if you need me. And that's okay. It's understanding these patterns that allows us to have compassion. Because if we don't understand what's going on in our body, then what do? We resent ourselves. We think we're lazy. We create these stories around it. So as you move into your luteal phase, this is really like the complete and finish phase. So where we ideally start to close up all those goals and things that we were working on in the last month. I don't know about anyone listening, but I have been the queen in the past of like the perpetual to-do list with like those things that you never actually do because you don't really want to do them. So month after month, they're just kind of forever on that list. This phase really invites us to complete, to finish, so that we can move into our menstrual time and not have this thing hanging over us, so that we can actually rest. So then, as you come into your period, this really is, and any entrepreneur needs to hear this, the most productive thing you can do with your menstrual cycle is take care of yourself and rest, to refill your cup. Whether that's taking an hour for yourself or taking an entire day, it doesn't really matter so much what you do, but the intention behind it. This is also a really good time to reflect. And I think as entrepreneurs especially, that's such a valuable tool to really look back on the last month. What worked really well? What didn't work well? What did you learn from that experience? What do you want to change in the next month? How could you delegate better? And take that and move forward into the next month. So you're always learning from these experiences, staying really in that empowered, digital CEO kind of role. And then truly taking that space to rest. So self-care is a hot word right now. And, whatever it is that really nourishes you becomes the priority here. So the cool thing about all this is you can see it's basically 4 distinct phases or 4 weeks. And so you can literally take this concept and plug that into your Google Calendar and know that generally around this time is when I'll have my period. So I'm maybe not going to schedule those sales calls. Maybe I'm not going to do that launch. Maybe I'll start to piece this in to the best extent that I can. So everyone will take it to their own degree. But just that is enough to really end that burnout depletion cycle that so many of us fall into.
Wow, so interesting. So this is more of a question for those that might be pregnant out there, like myself. How do those cycles and those phases work when you're pregnant?
So those definitely are heightened. And it goes the same too for anyone that doesn't have a cycle currently, whether they've had a hysterectomy or gone through menopause or for whatever reason. Your body's still moving through those phases at all times, especially when you're pregnant though. And you're really in more of that restorative nourishment phase, I'm sure, as you feel when you're pregnant, where it's more so about doing things that feel really good. For people that in general just don't have cycles, they can start to track these productivity patterns also in alignment with the moon. So with the full moon, that's traditionally when women would ovulate. So that would be your more productive time. And most cultures around the world traditionally menstruated with the new moon. So that could kind of be your pattern again to track your own innate cycle.
Okay, that's so cool. So do you deal, I'm super into like moon stuff. Do you deal a lot with that in your practice? And is that really part of some of the fundamentals?
It is actually. Yeah. And I often find if I can teach someone kind of the phases of the moon, it makes it more tangible for them to understand the phases of the feminine, because we're taught that we're supposed to just be constant and the same always. You just have to bring in the same effort every day. And the feminine doesn't work that way. We're always fluctuating and ebbing and flowing, and we're not meant to be the same. That is such a toxic box to try and put us into. And so if I can show them the significance of the lunar patterns and show them the science that shows that women do sink and ebb and flow with the moon, usually that's a really nice kind of a introduction into their own bodies.
Oh, I love that. And so what would be some basic things that you would sort of teach or lay a foundation for in terms of just understanding the moon cycles? Like, is it very similar to what you've talked about with, depending on what moon we have, it's better to take on certain things? Is it very similar to that, or is it quite different?
It is quite similar. We really do connect in such a powerful way between the lunar phases and the feminine body. And I think through understanding, we start to remove these taboo ideas. We start to remove the shame. We start to remove these feelings like we have to show up a certain way. And so the moon really does pave a pretty beautiful blueprint for our own healing.
I love that. So in terms of, you've just taught us so much already, which is incredible. So what are some of the pitfalls that can happen that maybe it shows up for you to know that you need to pay closer attention to these things? Like, what are some of the common things you would see so that people know, oh, like maybe this really is something I need to dive deeper into?
Well, it's such a good question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that. Ooh, I like this.
That's awesome.
I think our bodies are so wise, and we all know when something is off. And it may be easy to kind of brush it off or to assume like, well, it'll just sort itself out. But we all know when something doesn't feel right. So especially if we feel like we are completely depleted in our business, if we feel tired all the time, if we feel emotionally just drained or overwhelmed, these are all little cues from the body. And, in cultures like Ayurveda and in Chinese medicine, they believe that emotions, if not addressed, do manifest into physical health problems. And so if we get to the point where we do have something like a cyst, if we do see periods that are incredibly irregular or super heavy and painful, that again starts to indicate that there's been an imbalance for a long time. Nothing just happens overnight. Nothing really is random in health. And so rather than seeing it as a bad thing, what if we saw it as an invitation to listen a little bit more, to see how we can serve ourselves, our bodies a little bit better? I think that's such an empowering reframe that we don't really hear about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like we tend to focus, I think, so much on the problem and like what's not working instead of the like root cause of like what might be manifesting itself, like more the symptom. Right. Versus like getting to the root of it. But maybe, is that something that you notice quite a bit in looking at the different types of medicine that you would say like maybe like separates Western from Eastern medicine?
That's completely it. Yes. In Western medicine, typically we're looking at treating the symptoms. So not necessarily fixing it, but more so quality of life, helping people feel better. And that obviously has its time and place, very essential in many circumstances. But there's also that time and place to, I think, take it a farther step back and say, but why is this happening? Is there something that we are doing in our lifestyle, with our diets, with these emotions that we have the power to change? And then does that have the power to change the health experience we're having?
Gotcha. And so what other, so like as I mentioned, like I feel like you're opening up this whole other realm that we often don't talk about. And so I'm really curious, like what sort of tools or things do you like to use in your business to maybe, I guess like one part is the planning to make sure that you're working in the right phase with how your body is reacting. But are there any other things that you really are drawn to that you're like, I love this. It kind of flows with everything we've talked about. Really great tool. I would totally recommend it.
I think one big thing is batch contents. So really allowing yourself to take that time of productivity to really do all the work that you maybe won't want to do at other phases of your cycle. So for me, that's batch recording podcasts. That's making, graphics for social media. That might be some days where you have back-to-back clients, for 5 or 6 hours. And for me, that really works because then I feel like for the rest of the month, if I have those days where I'm not feeling it, where I really need like a mental health day, the like chill on the couch kind of day, then I feel like I have more permission to do that. But that's obviously going to be a lot harder if we're not batch recording or anything like that. We're going to feel like we still have to show up. We still have to put in the effort. And then that's where we start to get into that working against our bodies rather than listening to them.
And when you say like working against and listening, what are some of the things that you would recommend paying attention to? Like, I think that we could all probably say, okay, yeah, I sort of know when I feel depleted, but I think sometimes what ends up happening is we allow it to go so far where we're like fighting and resisting it that we haven't seen the signs leading up to it. And then we're sort of left like needing even more time to restore and recuperate. So what would you recommend that we start to pay attention to and be aware of so we know that maybe things need a realignment?
Such a great question. The biggest thing, and one thing I teach anyone, whether I'm working with them on a health perspective or coaching them with business, is to actually start tracking their own cycle so that they can start to notice these natural fluctuations and you'll start to see patterns. So for example, there's, one size fits all doesn't exist here. So you might find that while theoretically with your ovulation phase, you should feel more productive. Some women find that that's a little different. Maybe that's a little later in more of their luteal phase. There's nothing wrong with that. So you can actually get an app on your phone, and that way you can actually start to track when you're on your period, and it'll predict the rest of the month for you. And then in these apps as well, you can predict, or not predict, but track your daily mood. You can track your fertility. You can track all these little signs that will allow you to check in with yourself. And I think that is the first step in starting to notice these fluctuations. Because like you said, most of us have never done any of this. We have no idea. I remember when I started tracking, I thought, I think I just feel good every day, right? I had never paid attention to, but how do I really feel right now? And what is the sensation in my body? Do I feel kind of dry and tired? Do I feel really excited and creative? And from that, then you can kind of predict every month after that and plug into those key times.
Awesome. And so do you have any apps you'd recommend?
I do. So if you have an iPhone, Life is my favorite one. And if you have an Android, there's one called Flow. That's really nice.
Okay, perfect. And so would there be any other tips or pieces of advice? Like I know that you work with a lot of clients on the health side of things and then the business side of things as well. What other things around business do you think that most people would be surprised to hear about? Because like when you started talking about the phases, like that was, something new I'd never heard before. What other things do you find that you end up coaching your clients on the business side of things?
One of the biggest things is truly granting them the permission to rest. That's usually pretty revolutionary for people because we all think if you want more, you have to do more. And it's such an old paradigm. It's not how we have to work anymore. That's the concept of working smarter, right? Not harder. And so to give people permission to like take a weekend off or to even, take a couple days off, especially when they're on their period, is usually pretty shocking. And usually they resist it a little bit. But as soon as they start to notice that, they do feel more productive the rest of the month. So really, if there's anything that people take from this episode, I hope that it is that you can take that permission to rest. That sometimes the most productive thing you can do is take care of yourself. And especially if you're feeling those beginning phases of burnouts where you're not feeling as excited about your business, you're not feeling as sparked up by this. If it's becoming more of an obligation than something you get to do, that's the beginning sign of burnouts in your business. So that's like, go take care of you for a couple days, come back to yourself, come back into your body, and then show up online again, and then show up with those clients.
Yeah, I have a mentor that was one of the most shocking things that I think I learned from him was that he had said, asking yourself that question, how do I make this easy? What would it look like if it were easy? And it's like, it is funny because sometimes we have this association that the only way to grow, it's really hard and it's through hustle and like depleting yourself. And yet, looking at it from that other angle, like, but what if it was easy? What if you were giving yourself that rest? And what if that helped you create the business of your dreams? Because it's totally possible. It's all what we make of it and how we look at it. So I love that you said that.
Preach. Exactly.
Yeah. Love it. So where would be some of the places that people could find you, learn more about you, and maybe, start to get a better understanding of how they could work with you?
Yeah, so they can find me at CassandraWilder.com. I have the Goddess Ceremony podcast where we talk about a lot of the health components of cycles, but also business components. So there's lots of fun free resources on that. And then I'm on Instagram at Menstruation Queen.
I love it. Awesome. I so appreciate all your wisdom and everything that you've shared. And I love how different and like eye-opening everything that you've provided has been. I just love when you stumble across people that are just like making such an impact and such a difference in opening our eyes and really challenging that status quo in business. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you being on today.
Thank you, Ashley.
If you're a health or fitness influencer and you're struggling to find your people online, our Done For You Find Your People posting plan can help. These social media posting templates, all written by a professional copywriter to inspire curiosity, have been shown to boost engagement as much as 80%. Seriously, that's crazy, but it's true. And you can grab 5 for free today at ashleyshaw.ca/FYP posts. Soon, you won't have to worry about finding your people because they'll be finding you. Again, the place to grab 5 of those Find Your People social posting templates for free is ashleyshaw.ca/FYP posts.